they will believe anything, and they're always looking for something to hang their hat on of their victimhood and their excuses and their reasons why the world isn't fair and how we all need to just be ashamed of ourselves and bow down to the far left. You know, you could call them the alt left. Everyone loves to say the alt right, but literally the alt left, which anybody who's just even a modicum, just a minorly to the right will right of alt left. The alt left will call Nazis and will call bigots and will call all the ifs and all the isms. So, anyways, he's the professor that wrote this article that we're going to read, and I found it a very interesting article. And I thought it would be worth doing a video on, so that's what we're doing. So let's jump in here. The name of the article is, excuse me, it's not the name of the article. Take a drink here. The name of the article is that going to be in the view? No. Welcome to Culture War 2.0, the Great Realignment. Almost sounds alt-righty. Great replacement. This is where it gets bizarre. So this was written just a couple days ago. For 6 decades or more, America's political history has been driven by culture warfare. Word's going to give me problems tonight. I know it. This is usually traced to the social revolutions of the 1960s, but it began earlier. Culture war. Why does that? That's like me trying to say Arnold Palmer. I can never say Arnold Palmer when I'm ordering Arnold Palmer. It may just twist up my tongue for some reason. Culture War 1.0 began in the 1950s as religious enthusiasts sought to win hearts, minds, and souls for Christ in a society that was rapidly liberalizing and secularizing. That is the war that drifted to the whimpering end as recently as 2013, when the Supreme Court handed down culturally significant rulings bolstering the case for same-sex marriage. In 2015, the court gave same-sex marriage its full endorsement, ruling in Obergefell versus Hodges that restrictions on same-sex marriages were unconstitutional. By this point, Culture War 1.0 was over. The first culture war was mostly fought over issues of religious faith and morality, such as whether creationism was a viable alternative to the theory of biological evolution and whether limits should be placed on institutionalizing Christian values in the public sphere. In Culture War 2.0, the supernatural metaphysics and even religion more broadly have become irrelevant. I'm going to turn my mic up just a hair. Check. Sorry, guys. I just want to make sure that I'm not peeking out here. Okay, check. Christian, in Culture War 2.0, the supernatural metaphysics and even religion more broadly have become irrelevant. The demands of Christians' faith and morality have been replaced by something far more threatening to society founded on Enlightenment principles. Culture War 2.0 rotates around 3 axes. Number 1, the new rules of engagement. Number 2, the correspondent theory of truth. And number 3, the role intersectionality ought to play in everyone's worldview. Let's examine each of these features to see how Culture War 2.0 has made allies out of former ideological enemies. Call this the Great Realignment. Rules of engagement. The rules of engagement relate to how we deal with our disagreements. In Culture War 1.0, if an evolutionary biologist gave a public lecture about the age of the Earth based on geological dating techniques, creationist detractors would issue a response, insist that such dating techniques are biased, challenge them to a debate, and ask pointed, if unfairly loaded, questions during the Q&A session. In Culture War 2.0, disagreements with a speaker are sometimes met with attempts at deplatforming. Rowdy campaigns for the invitation to be rescinded before the speech can be delivered. If this is unsuccessful, critics may resort to disrupting the speaker by screaming and shouting, engaging noisy noisemakers, pulling the fire alarm, or ripping out the speaker wires. All of these are linked to, and I will put this link in my video description later so you guys can go and read it. Or I guess what I could also do is put it in the chat. Technology, who knew? Just for anybody who also wants to, pull up some of these hyperlinks that are there. I'm not going to go into the hyperlinks, it would take too long, but some of these examples that he's listing. So anyways, the goal is not to counter the speaker with better arguments or even to insist on an alternative view, but to prevent the speaker from airing her views at all, or his. Today's left-wing culture warriors are not roused to action only by speakers whose views run afoul of new moral orthodoxy. They combat problematic ideas anywhere they're found, including peer-reviewed academic journals. In 2017, Portland State University political science professor Bruce Gilley published a peer-reviewed article titled "The Case for Colonialism" in the Third World Quarterly. Many academians were enraged, but rather than write a rebuttal or challenge Gilley to a public debate, as they might have done in the era of Culture War 1.0, they circulated a popular petition demanding that Portland State rescind its tenure, fire him, and even take away his PhD. The Case for Colonialism was eventually withdrawn after the journal editor received serious and credible threats of personal violence. Christian organizations have a long history of censorship, and this has continued to some extent even in recent decades. All the same, such an attempt to suppress an academic article would have been almost unthinkable during Culture War 1.0. There were some analogous attempts on the part of Christians during precursors of this culture war, as, for example, in the incidents surrounding Tennessee's Butler Act of 1925 and the subsequent Scopes Monkey trial. And religious would-be censors during Culture War 1.0 did occasionally make attempts on novels and movies interpreted as blasphemous or obscene, such as The Last Temptation of Christ. I remember when that came out, and I remember everyone getting, I never saw it, but I remember because I was raised in the church and whatnot, so I remember that being a big deal. But I was only, I won't tell you how old I was at that time, but I was still a kid. The 80s were good. But for the most part, creationists in the first culture war didn't want evolutionary biologists to lose their tenure and their doctorates. They wanted to debate and prove them wrong. One common theme running throughout Culture War 2.0 is the idea endorsed by many well-meaning activists that speech is violence. And if speech is violence, the thinking goes, then we must combat speech with the same vigor we use to combat physical violence. This entails that we cannot engage supposedly violent speech, sometimes referred to indiscriminately as hate speech, merely with words. Reread that sentence, sorry. This entails that we cannot engage supposedly violent speech, sometimes referred to indiscriminately as hate speech, merely with words. That's better when I inflect it like that. Makes more sense. If someone is being punched in the face, it's futile to say, "Would you kindly stop?" or "This is not an ethical way to behave. You need to take action." The rules of engagement change if speech cannot be met with speech, with written rebuttals, debates, and Q&A sessions. If speech is violence, it must either be prevented or stopped with something beyond speech, such as punching Nazis, throwing milkshakes filled with concrete and other chemicals, or using institutional mechanisms to smother unwanted discourse. Correspondence theory of truth. The correspondence theory of truth basically states that objective truth exists and that we can know something about it through evidence and reason. That is, there are objective truths to be known, and we gain reliable knowledge about them when our beliefs align with reality. It's termed the correspondence theory of truth because a statement is considered true when it corresponds with reality and false when it does not. In Culture War 1.0, the correspondence theory of truth was given on all sides. In 2014, even as Culture War 1.0 was ending, Bill Nye, the science guy, debated Ken Ham from Answers in Genesis over the age of the earth, with Nye arguing the evidence demonstrated Earth was considerably older than Ham claimed. Despite their differences, both believed there was truth out there and that we could know it through science, reason, and in Ham's case, faith and scripture. And, as was common in Culture War 1.0, Nye and Ham also agreed on the rules of engagement, structured debate, which they entered with respect for the process. In Culture War 2.0, the correspondence theory of truth, with its commitment to the idea that there are better and worse ways to come to knowledge about an objectively knowable world, is no longer common ground. For those on one side of this latest fight, the correspondence theory of truth has been replaced with more subjective ways of knowing. But this is not merely a turn away from objectivity to subjectivity. Culture War 2.0 is marked by one side's turn towards understanding knowledge as determined by identity markers, like race, gender, disability status, the sexual orientation. And, so goes the theory, the more oppression variables comprise one's identity, the clearer one's understanding of reality becomes. Think about it like this. Cis hetero white males see the world in grayscale. Every oppression characteristic gives one access to an additional color. So, cis hetero black males see the world in grayscale and blue. Cis lesbian black females see the world in grayscale, blue, and orange, or purple as it might be, in their hair. Trans, non-binary, disabled, uneducated black immigrants see the world in a panoply of colors and thus are positioned to have a more accurate view of reality. We are living in clown world. In Culture War 2.0, correspondence theories of truth aren't just dead. Truth itself is inaccessible to people who do not possess the right identity characteristics. And I'm just going to pause there for a second and throw some thoughts out. This is absolutely so true, being that we now, the white male, are on the very bottom of that pyramid, of that color scale. We're not even, we don't even get to see the world in black and white or grayscale. We are blind. White males are blind in the current social intersectionality scale or pyramid of truth and understanding. We are blind. And that is why we must push down and reject and condemn any whiteness within us and not have any kind of, respect for white people or, I don't know why I can't find the word I'm looking for right now. Pleasure or, I can't even believe have any kind of respect or be proud in any way that we're white. And this, again, as I will say right now, has nothing to do with a white supremacy of the alt-right. When I say I'm proud to be white, it does not mean that I hate anybody who isn't white, or I think if you're not white, you aren't as good as me. That is stupidity. We see that going on, I think, a little bit right now with certain content and influencers, if you will, online, and I can't get down with that. I can't get down with that real extremism of the the demonizing of demographics completely. But anyways, I don't want to digress into what I think there. This is so true as a white man that you have no vision if you are white, and for that it's really sad. Anyways, let's just go on. I'm getting a little off track here. Let's get back to the paper, the article. What's up, guys? Glad to see you guys in the chat. I'll read some of your comments when I'm done reading this. Intersectionality, the next chat or bullet point, if you will. Kimberly Crenshaw, professor of law at Columbia Law School and the University of California, Los Angeles, defined and popularized the term intersectionality. In essence, intersectionality is the idea that seemingly separate identities like black and gay females overlap and compound one's experience of oppression. For example, black women are oppressed in ways recognizably different than those applying to white women or black men. According to intersectionalists, this is the indispensable insight needed to understand social and political reality. It is the best way to understand how various identity characteristics inform public perceptions and confer unearned advantages or privilege on some groups, notably white heterosexual men, while others remain oppressed. Acceptance or rejection of this intersectional mindset is a fault line in Culture War 2.0. Specifically, the dividing line defining sides in this culture war arise along one's answers to what role intersectionality should play in how we understand reality and how we design legal, economic, and educational systems. Tell me that is not exactly what we have seen in the last 5 to 10 years, but really the last 5 years. This explosion with this intersectionality ideology that is just flooding everything, every entertainment, every movie, every discussion, the workplace, your extracurricular activities, your church, your everything, your school. It's just flooded everyone everywhere, and it is becoming out of control. It's fun to mock, I will say, some of the things the social justice warriors and this intersectional crowd comes up with. They're kind of fun to make fun of. Let's be real. It is, but it's crazy. It says, For intersectionalists, an intersectional understanding of the world is imperative for social justice, equity, and remediating past and ongoing injustices like racism and homophobia. Why? Because reliable knowledge is tied to identity. For others, ideas such as Crenshaw's might be helpful tools. Ideas such as Crenshaw's might be helpful tools to understand how a person could experience specific forms of oppression, but it ends there. There's no moral epistemological imperative to use an ideologically interpretive intersectional lens, rather than a traditionally liberal one emphasizing individuality and universal principles to refashion society and its systems. I'm going to read that again. There's no moral or epistemological imperative to use an ideologically interpretive intersectional lens, rather than a traditionally liberal one emphasizing individuality and universal principles to refashion society and its systems. The role intersectionality ought to play in forming one's understanding of the world and in creating systems is causing schisms throughout society. From knitting clubs to, I just said all this, I didn't know he was going to touch on this, but whatever. From knitting clubs to clinical medicine and even within the Southern Baptist Convention. Intersectionality is currently dividing Christendom. Many younger millennial Christians believe one must examine Scripture through an intersectional lens. While other older baby boomer Christians categorically reject the need for any additional lens to interpret the Bible. Me shaking my head, you know what a category I'm in. The Great Realignment. This is where it gets bizarre. Those people who accept the correspondence theory of truth, even though they may not know it by name, agree on the traditional rules of engagement, discourse, debate, and dialogue, and do not view intersectionality as a necessary model for getting to the truth. Academians in this group often adopt some variant or variation of standpoint theory. These individuals are on the side of Culture War 2.0, and they include many liberal atheists and conservative Christians. Those on the other side of 2.0 do not subscribe to correspondence theory of truth, believe speech should be shut down if it is hurtful or potentially harmful, and think intersectional, transformative approaches are necessary to refashion systems. These people are also predominantly atheists and Christians, intersectional woke atheists and intersectional woke Christians. As a point of contact, I am a non-intersectional liberal atheist. If a conservative Christian believes Jesus walked on water and believes this either is or is not true for everyone regardless of race or gender, and if she values discourse and adheres to basic rules of engagement, then she is closer to my worldview than an atheist who believes race and gender play a role in determining objective truth, and that her opponents should not be allowed to air what she considers harmful views. Many conservative Christians understand this intuitively. So do many liberal atheists. And that's what makes this great realignment of Culture War 2.0 so bizarre. It's no longer liberals and atheists versus conservatives and Christians. It's some atheists aligning with some Christians and other atheists aligning with other Christians. And each in turn believe that what's at stake is no less than the future of Western civilization. How this will play out depends on who wins Culture War 2.0. Final thought. It may be that there is more to this picture than we are yet able to see, though this article captures my current thinking on the topic. It may still be incomplete because it takes for the whole